Hello and a very good day. My name is Abhilash and I am from the AD Solutions team or the Active Directory Solutions team here at ManageEngine, and I will be your presenter for today. Now, before we go ahead and jump in and see what's in store for us, I would like to thank you all for joining in. Thank you so much for taking out the time. Now, I understand that these are troubled times, and I hope all of you are indoors and safe and with your families. Now, before we go ahead and jump into today's webinar and see what's in store for us, I would like to run a quick audio and a video check because we're all working from home internet, and I want to make sure that everything goes smoothly today. So I'll quickly start off with an audio check. If you can hear my voice, if my voice is well and audible without any distortion, just give me a confirmation using the Q&A tab, please. Use the Q&A tab that you see in front of you and let me know if my voice is well and clear without any distortion in the audio. Thank you, Naveed. Thank you so much for your response. And I hope you can see the screen as well, the title and my email. If you could give me another confirmation for that, that would be really helpful. Thank you, Frederick. Thank you, Naveed. Thank you so much. All right, perfect. Now, before we go ahead and jump in, I would like to thank you all for joining in again. And I would like to tell you that the entire session today is being recorded and the recording would reach to you on your email post the webinar. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A tab and keep them coming. And if you have questions later in the day, you can always drop me an email to abi@manageengine.com. That's abi@manageengine.com. And I would be more than happy to help you out. All right, so today's webinar's topic is hybrid IT essentials that you can't live without. So what are we going to discuss about today and what are these essentials we're talking about? Now, the important thing I wanted to shed some light on today is that organizations used to be on premises, used to be just in-house a few decades ago. It used to be just on-premises resources, on-premises software, or on-premises Active Directory to be more precise. But now organizations are slowly embracing the cloud, right? More so public cloud services like Azure Active Directory, Amazon Web Services, and Google Cloud. Organizations now are taking the help of cloud vendors or third-party vendors to give resources or to outsource resources to their employees. Right, so that is the current state of IT these days. Organizations are embracing the cloud, but the shift to the cloud isn't fully complete either. So IT essentials are something that an organization of any size, be it a small, medium, or a large organization, absolutely needs to better monitor their infrastructure, to enforce security, to better administer and manage their IT infrastructure, and also to understand or to gain visibility on what's happening inside their IT infrastructure. Be it on-premise, be it cloud, or be it a combination of on-premise and cloud, or a hybrid combination in this case, you will need to adopt the right essentials to manage your IT infrastructure efficiently. So today's webinar, we will be discussing about these essentials. So what are IT essentials? Right? Often when I say essentials, people are often confused with tools or third-party software that would help them do a few things on their IT infrastructure. I've had people come up to me and ask me if, hey, I have this tool, this looks good, can I use it? Will it help my infrastructure? But the answer is choosing a tool is not sufficient to better manage or administer your IT infrastructure. Right? Choosing a tool is important, but the essentials are the basic requirements that need to be understood, that need to be fulfilled to truly understand what is needed for your IT infrastructure. Right? Tools, there are many open source tools out there. There are many paid tools out there that may look good on paper, but when you actually take it and install it and deploy it in your environment, you will notice that the tool does not offer what it claims to do. So in order to pick the right tool, in order to pick the right software to better administer your IT infrastructure, you will have to understand the essentials that you need. And in order to understand the essentials, you'll have to look into a lot of factors. For instance, security, your organization data, access governance, access authorization, right? And your end user dynamics. Things like these have to be taken into concern because these directly affect how you approach your essentials. These parameters directly affect how you select your essentials, right? So in a nutshell, IT essentials are something that have to be understood. It may differ from organization to organization, or it may be the exact same. And there are a few common essentials that can be used, a few uniform essentials for every organizations. But all in all, choosing the right essentials will help you to pick the right tools and thereby better manage and supervise your IT infrastructure. So let's take a look at today's agenda. We'll try to understand the current state of IT. Now, I said that organizations are adopting the cloud. Let's see what's all that about. In the second part of today's webinar, we'll take a look at the IT landscape, meaning how it used to be in the olden days when we just had traditional on-premises Active Directory versus how it is now when organizations are adopting cloud services. The third part, we'll take a look at a few parameters that we need to consider when we decide on the essentials. And then we here have a formula called the triangle formula that will help you choose and pick the essentials that you need. Last but not the least, our tool, ManageEngine AD360. I will be showcasing you the tool and helping you to choose the essentials that you need. All right, so understanding the current state of IT, what do we have here? Like I said, it's just not on-premise anymore. Organizations are slowly adopting the cloud, and users, data, permissions, resources, workloads, everything is spread across on-premise and cloud infrastructures, right? And organizations are mostly adopting for public cloud services. The reason being pretty simple: lesser maintenance, lesser management, right? The vendor will take care of the third-party cloud service, so lesser work from the organization. So organizations are adopting cloud services, public cloud services like Azure Active Directory, Amazon Web Services, and Google Cloud. And currently Amazon Web Services is at the leading and Azure Active Directory is at the second place. And I have no doubt in saying that in the future, Azure Active Directory might catch up with Amazon Web Services because organizations are increasingly adopting Azure Active Directory. The adoption rate for Azure AD is slowly accelerating because most organizations around the world have on-premises Active Directory, right? And choosing Azure Active Directory seems like an optimum choice because why? Both are by Microsoft. They will work better, they are better compatible. And the fact that Azure Active Directory has around 28 data centers around the world, offers support to multiple applications, makes Azure AD a go-to choice. So that's my point here. It's not just on-premise Active Directory anymore. Organizations are adopting cloud services, more so public cloud services, and Azure AD is a top choice. So most infrastructures these days work on the basis of on-premise Active Directory and some of Azure Active Directory, a public cloud service, which make up the hybrid IT infrastructure. So the change in the IT landscape, how was it before and how is it now? Olden days, users just had one identity, just a user logging on to his or her domain joined system, and the user could only access the resources on his or her domain joined system. But now with the introduction of Azure AD and with the introduction of cloud applications like Office 365, Microsoft Sway, Teams, Yammer, and also custom SaaS applications that are not managed by Active Directory or Azure Active Directory that have their own authentication and authorization policies, users now have more than one identity, right? Each user has multiple logons and multiple identities across applications. To put it short, a hybrid identity. Workloads earlier were just bound to on-premise services, meaning your on-premise Windows file servers, your Windows file clusters, etc. But now workloads are still bound to on-premises, but they may gradually shift to the cloud, not now, but in the future. Earlier, authentication was just for on-premise applications. Authorization rules, meaning what a user can access, was only bound to on-premise, but now authentication and authorization policies have to be revised to support the cloud or the hybrid IT environment, right? Because a user can have access to resources both across on-premise and the cloud, and the authentication and authorization policies have to be revised, have to be re-engineered. Earlier, on-premise resources, only when they were monitored, was sufficient. For instance, if you had Exchange, on-premise Exchange mailboxes, only if you monitored the storage quota of the mailboxes online on your on-premise Exchange, if you monitored which of your users have mailboxes on your on-premise Exchange, that would work. But now with the introduction of the cloud, resources must be monitored across the cloud as well. And when I say monitored here, I mean monitored for consumption and utilization rate. For instance, Office 365 licenses can be used up, right? The number of users in OneDrive can be more. The number of files in OneDrive can exceed the specified limit. Skype can have more than one user, so Skype may be filling up as well. If you have Exchange Online, you can have many users that have mailboxes in Exchange Online. So resource monitoring and consumption rate and utilization have to be monitored across on-premise and cloud in today's hybrid IT environments. And last but not the least, security and incident detection systems, right? Your audit logs, your security events, earlier were just bound to on-premise Active Directory, but now with the introduction of public cloud service like Azure Active Directory, these systems have to be redesigned, have to be reinvented to support Azure AD or the public cloud service as well. Just having sufficient security controls on your on-prem is not sufficient, because there are potentially more than one logon for a user, more than one access for a user across the cloud, and a logon or access, no matter on-premise or cloud, has to be monitored and has to be secure, right? So our security and incident detection systems have to be reworked as well. So that's many identities, workload may be spread to the cloud, authorization and authentication policies have to be re-engineered, consumption rate for resources have to be monitored across the cloud as well, and your security protocols and your security detection systems have to be re-engineered to support the cloud. So what are the parameters you need to consider when deciding on the essentials that you need? Number one, you need to monitor, or you need to watch what your hybrid user identities are authenticated to do, because authentication is the first form of access, right? Only when your user logs on to an application will he or she be able to access that application, right? So the first thing is authentication, either on-premise or cloud. Second is access governance. You will need to watch how the access is governed to resources. How much access is governed to resources? Which of your users have access to the resources on-premise or cloud, and how is the access governed? What is the mechanism used? Third is access and permissions must be documented, meaning once you grant access to resources across on-premise or Azure Active Directory, the granted access must be documented. For example, let's say you have delegated a few roles for your users on-premise and in Office 365, right? And when you delegate admin roles, this access must be documented, must be monitored. It cannot be granted and then forgotten. Access and permission modifications have to be monitored. For instance, if a user joins in an organization today, the user will undergo many access changes, property changes, right? Might make many changes or modifications on the resources once a user is in the organization. So all of these access changes, both on the user and by the user on multiple resources, have to be monitored. And last but not the least, security and compliance. Access is granted to the user, right? So what the user is doing with the access, that's something that has to be monitored, and that's something that will help you be compliant as well. So we came up with a simple formula, right? This is not complicated at all. This is a triangle formula that will help you select the essentials that you need. Right? So in any IT organization, no matter the size or the industry, these three sides of the triangle will help you secure your IT infrastructure. Number one is visibility, meaning you need to understand where the permissions are granted on your IT infrastructure. It could be on-premise Active Directory, it could be Azure Active Directory. The important thing to do before you start configuring administration or management activities or even start enforcing security is to understand where the permissions are granted, right? So the first step is gaining visibility. The second step is to set up proper management systems, management mechanisms, management processes in place so that permission, when granted, is granted in a secure and a calculated manner, right? So that's the second side of the triangle: permission administration and management. And last but not the least, when permissions are changed, when access is modified either on the object or by the object on another object, it must be monitored, right? So to put it in simple words, the where, meaning where are the permissions granted, and how are the permissions granted, and when the permissions are granted, are they monitored? If we address these three things, we will be able to zero down on the essentials that we need. Right? So throughout the course of this webinar, we will be seeing such use cases, and we will see how 8360, our integrated IAM solution, will help you solve these problems, or will help you get closer to the essentials that you need. All right, without further ado, the first thing is governing access to a resource. If you remember, when we discussed the parameters, I spoke about authentication of hybrid identities, right? Because authentication dictates access to the resource. That is the initial form of access. And how does authentication happen? Logons and passwords. So let me illustrate this using a simple example. Let's say your user logs on to a domain joined system today, right, in a hybrid IT infrastructure. So the user will have to key in a password for his Active Directory, will have to key in a password for any on-premise applications that he or she may have, will have to key in a password for his Office 365 account. And if there are third-party applications used, such as Slack, or such as, let's say, any HR application, or let's say even HackerRank for that matter, a user will have to key in another password, right? So the point I'm trying to put forth here is users have multiple logons in a hybrid environment, and these logons are spread across on-premise and cloud infrastructures. And logons, since logons authenticate access to a resource, that's the first thing that must be secured in your organization, right? So how do you go about securing logons? Because every application has its own authentication policy. For example, if I quickly head on to my VM here, you will see that this is Active Directory's password policy, right? These 6 settings determine the password strength for your on-premise users. Similarly, Azure has its own password policy, and any custom SaaS applications that doesn't come under the roof of Active Directory or Azure Active Directory has its own set of password guidelines. Right? So there are multiple password policies that are used to create and manage passwords across multiple logons in a hybrid IT infrastructure, which makes password management or securing passwords extremely difficult. For example, when there are different password creation rules, your end users are annoyed. Your end users are frustrated because now they will have to create many passwords according to many rules, right? Your administrators are frustrated as well because there are multiple rules that have to be followed. There are multiple policies across multiple logons. They find it challenging to maintain password security across multiple application logons, right? So when a user is forced to create passwords across multiple logons, he or she will create weak passwords. He or she will reuse passwords across logons, and he or she will rely on written records, right? For instance, write a bunch of passwords on a Post-it note and stick it on their computer, or write and save a password on their smartphone note-taking application, right? Administrators suffers as well. Administrators and helpdesk technicians also suffer as well because they are bogged down with password reset tickets, because like I said, users have more than one password. When users have more than one password, they keep calling the administrator so they can get their password reset whenever they forget it, right? And multiple logons in a hybrid IT environment make it extremely difficult to ensure strong passwords, like I said, because there are multiple authentication policies, and maintain a strong password etiquette, meaning passwords have to be changed constantly, passwords have to be rotated at a healthy frequency to maintain security. But when there are multiple logons, multiple policies across logons, and multiple password creation guidelines, the whole process gets confusing. And to top it off, policies across Active Directory or Azure Active Directory or some of the applications for that matter let users get away with weak user passwords. For example, Active Directory password policy that we just saw lets your users get away with passwords like password at 123 or admin at 123, right? Azure AD's password policy also lets your users get away with such weak passwords. And password policies across custom applications, who is to know, right? Because they may have very lenient guidelines, and a user might just set a password like password at 123 today, set password at 1234 as another password tomorrow, and simply keep iterating and reusing passwords. So separate authentication password policies across applications is a bad idea. So this is what I propose. We need to have a uniform password policy across multiple logons, right? So this is what I propose. So if I jump into my browser here, you can see that I have something called AD Self-Service Plus open, right? So AD Self-Service Plus is our end user password management solution, a part of AD 360, right? So everything I will be showing you today are in separate modules, but they are all a part of AD 360. So with that clear, let me show you what I mean. If I head into configuration right here, let me log back in again, right? So just to give you some context, we're trying to enforce a single password policy across all logons, right? So if I click on configuration, click on policy configuration, you can see that I can create policies based on OUs, groups, and single users, right? So AD Self-Service Plus works on the basis of policies. So once a policy is created, all you have to do is head into password policy enforcer that you see right here and just select the policy that you want and enforce a custom password policy. Now this password policy that you see right here is in accordance with today's cybersecurity requirements. It does not replace your on-premise password policy, but it works on top of it to give you the security that you need, right? So this password policy that you see right here only affects your on-premise users, your on-premise Active Directory users. If you take a look at the options that you have, for instance, if I enter restrict pattern, you can ban the use of certain patterns like password at 123 that you can see here. You can ban the use of dictionary words. You can set a password length, a minimum and a maximum length. You can ban the usage of characters from a previous username or a previous password. You can set the number of Unicode characters that you want to use. You can set the number of special characters that you want to use, and the list simply goes on, right? So this password policy is granular, meaning it can be applied based on OUs, groups, and users. So if you have a user group that has only administrators and you want a stronger password policy, you can set that up as well, right? But if you can recollect, I spoke about a uniform password policy, a single password policy across all logons, on-premise or cloud, to reduce confusion, right? So how do we go about doing that? In order to do that, all you have to do is head into application right here, right? And if I click on the drop-down box, I'm pretty sure you would have guessed where I'm getting at. Click on single sign-on, right? You can see that we have 107 applications here for which single sign-on is supported. For instance, we've got Office 365, we've got Slack, we've got the Sugar CRM, we've got ServiceNow. The list simply goes on. We've got your G Suite application. So all you have to do is simply click on the application that you want and set up single sign-on, right? And if you have a custom application that is not in this list, but is SAML supported, you can head into custom application right here and set up single sign-on for that application as well, right? And single sign-on again works on the basis of policies. So if you can enforce a password policy, you can use the same policy that you've created right here that affects your OUs or groups and apply single sign-on. So what happens when you apply single sign-on? Let me show you a quick video, right? So this is a user, right, who has access to Office 365. So the user has already logged on to his domain join system using his on-premise AD password. And now the user wants to access his cloud application, Office 365, hosted in Azure Active Directory, of course. So this is what happens. The user opens up the browser, right, and enters the Office 365 URL. And when that happens, AD Self-Service Plus authenticates the user and authorizes the user to access the Office 365 application that you can see right here without actually logging on to Office 365, right? So what happened here is because we enforced the password policy at native Active Directory, the user had to go through that. And because we've set up single sign-on, that's all the user needs to do. A single password policy at your native Active Directory logon, governing access to all modes of logon, right, across your cloud applications as well. And that was possible with single sign-on. So this secures authentication, right? Because you've set up a strong password policy, so your users can never use weak passwords, and you've combined that with single sign-on to let that custom password policy apply to all modes of logons, thereby bringing down 10 or 20 logons per user to just one, the native Active Directory logon, right? So the AD Self-Service Plus's password policy works across on-premise Active Directory as well. For instance, when your user decides to change his or her password, the policy takes effect. When administrators reset passwords for the user, the policy also takes effect right here, right? And AD Self-Service Plus also offers two-factor authentication for additional security. So this is what I mean right here. So if I quickly show you, I apologize, I'm not able to show you the thing real time because I'm working from home. So here we go, right? A user logs on, keys in his or her password onto his domain join system, undergoes two-factor authentication that we've just set up. And once the user logs on, that's it. That's all the user needs to do because the logon is done, right? And the logon is governed by the custom password policy. And with two-factor authentication, we've double-checked the user's identity. And with single sign-on, the user will never have to enter a password another time across any other application. So this helps administrators streamline password security with just one policy, but also provides a level of comfort to your end users. There are 15 MFA options that you could choose. If your users prefer the old email or text message-based authentication, you can set that up. If your users prefer Authenticator, you can set that up as well, right? And deploying multi-factor authentication or password policies is pretty easy. All you have to do is configure a policy with an AD Self-Service Plus, select the options, and you're good to go. Right? We also have something called conditional access, a new feature that we've added into AD Self-Service Plus that will help you deploy policies or multi-factor authentication based on devices, business hours, or the geographical location your user is based out of. Right? So this will help you target an even specific or a finer group of users. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say, secure authentication, because authentication is the first step. And we did that with AD Self-Service Plus, custom password policy, single sign-on, and two-factor authentication, providing a level of comfort to your users and also enforcing security. The second thing that I would like for you to do is to understand the permission state. Right? So authentication was the first step. We've secured authentication. And if you can recollect the triangle formula, we spoke about visibility on permissions, right? So visibility is really important to understand where your IT infrastructure stands, right? And there are many, many places you need to look into to get the visibility that you need. For instance, on-premise environments, you've got your group memberships, You've got your Windows file server permissions. You've got your privileged and your delegated user permissions across your groups, your security objects, your files and folders, and the list simply goes on. Right? So how could we be of help, or how could AD360 be of help in this case? So if I quickly jump into AD360, you will see something called reports right here. So this is AD Manager Plus, a component of AD360 or a module of AD360. So once you're in AD Manager Plus, all you're going to do is head into reports right here, and this will help you determine the status of your on-premise infrastructure. There are reports that are sectioned, that are categorized for every object, right? So let me show you a very small but an important example here. If I head on to my VM, right, and open up my PowerShell session, you can see I'm trying to find information about a user called Luna. You can see the command net user Luna, right? And Luna has these group memberships alone. So Luna is not an administrator or a privileged user of any kind. At least that's what Active Directory tells me, right? So let me show you a little trick here. So under user reports, we've got something called groups for users, right? So I've got my Luna user selected here, and I've hit generate, and I have the report in front of me, and check this out. Luna is a member of marketing interns, right? That's something we knew already. Right? So Luna is a member of Marketing Interns, and Marketing Interns is a member of Marketing Australia. But little did we know that Marketing Australia is a member of administrators. Right? So let me quickly show you something else for some more context. If I head into users and groups and I select the administrators group, you can see that my user, Luna, is a member of the administrators group. How? Because of nested memberships. Marketing Interns was a member of Australia. Australia was a member of administrators, and via nested or indirect membership, Luna had the administrator's privilege. Now, this is a straightforward use case, but in full-blown IT environments, group memberships often tend to get mixed up, right? And Active Directory does not provide you with sufficient information, but with AD Manager Plus, we do. The beauty of these reports is that once you have the information, you can simply check the box and you can carry out the management action right then and there, meaning you could delete the user, you could disable the user, you could remove the user from the group and add the user to another group, and you could export the report if you want to, and you can add or remove columns in the report to see the attribute values that you wish to see. Right? So this is cross-domain details. If you have multiple domains, all you got to do is simply select a domain from the drop-down and check the group memberships for the domain. And not just group memberships, we've got reports on passwords. For instance, you want to find out users who haven't changed their passwords in a long time. Let's say you want to find out users who, let's say you want to find out the file permissions of your users, right? So NTFS reports right here helps you with that. All you got to do is select a particular report, select a user or multiple users or a group, select the folder path, specify the subfolder level, and once you click the access type, specify the access type, hit generate, and you have the report in front of you. Right? And not just that, we've got security reports right here that will help you determine permissions on all your security objects, on all your users, your computers, your OUs, your groups. The permissions on those can be obtained from right here. So all you got to do is, let's say, hit on search permissions, specify the object, select the user or group for whom you want to check the permissions for, hit generate, and you will have the information in front of you. Right? So the reports that you see right here are categorized towards AD objects. So there is a report for every object in AD, at least the critical ones. Right? For instance, user reports will help you determine information about all users. For instance, you can see, find out users who have duplicate attributes, users with empty attributes, users whose account is about to expire. You have granular reports for groups. You've got granular reports for computers. And if you use Exchange in your Active Directory environment, so this is on-prem Exchange reports right here, where you can enable, you can find out information based on certain attribute values inside Exchange. You can find out which of your users have a mailbox, do not have a mailbox. You can find out the distribution list membership for your users inside on-premise Exchange, and the list simply goes on. Right? So the reports that you see right here, users, passwords, groups, are categorized object-based reports using which you will be able to understand what your AD infrastructure is all about. Which of your users have permissions where on your AD infrastructure, right? But this is just AD. What happens to Azure Active Directory? In order to find out details about Azure Active Directory, all you got to do is head into Office 365 Manager Plus that you see right here. This is again a component of AD 360, but more catered towards Office 365, Azure Active Directory, and connected applications. For example, if I head into user reports right here, you will be able to find out details about all your users in Azure Active Directory, your password status, your MFA status, right? Your registered devices in Azure Active Directory. If I jump into group reports, you can find out details about the groups in Azure Active Directory, Office 365 groups, security groups, global groups, dynamic distribution groups. The list simply goes on, right? And we've got Exchange Online reports right here. For instance, if I head into other Exchange reports, you can find out the permissions on your shared mailboxes, on your public folders. You can find out permissions that are catered towards your Exchange Online mailboxes, meaning users who have delegated permissions over mailboxes, users who do not have delegated permissions, users with send as and send on behalf permission. And that's not all. If I head into security reports right here, you can find out permissions such as privileged user roles in Exchange, in Azure Active Directory, and even in Office 365. You can see admin roles right here will help you determine administrative membership in Exchange and also Azure Active Directory, right? We've got reports that are specific towards Azure AD supported applications, such as OneDrive, where you can find out information about OneDrive, Skype, and also Yammer and Teams. So there are a lot of reports that you could potentially sit down, check, and see which you like. This is a demo version that can be accessed anytime. All you got to do is type in this link and you can access it anytime. You can test it out and see if you have the reports that you need that will help you gain the insight that you need, right? So AD Manager Plus for understanding what's happening on your on-premises Active Directory, and Office 365 Manager Plus to understand the status of your Azure Active Directory and the connected applications, right? So that's the first step, visibility on permissions, understanding which groups your users are a member of, understanding what permissions your users have on file servers, understanding what permissions your users have in Azure Active Directory and Office 365 will help you determine the state of permissions in your IT infrastructure. So that is the first step. The second step is consumption-based reports, right? So if you can recollect in the table we discussed earlier, I spoke about consumption-based reports, and by using AD 360, you can find out reports such as licenses allocated, licenses used, mailbox usage reports, for instance, reports on the storage quota of mailboxes, and reports across applications as well. For instance, storage used in OneDrive, total user accounts in Office 365, file count in OneDrive, total user accounts in Skype, and the list simply goes on. So these are consumption and resource utilization based reports using which you can ensure that your resources are utilized judicially and there is no wastage of resources. For instance, a simple example here is your Office 365 licenses. Right? There are many a times when you may be buying extra licenses while disabled users in your organizations would be using up a license. So using these reports, you can ensure the judicial usage of your licenses, and not just licenses. You can monitor the storage quota, you can monitor the user count, you can monitor the file count. The list simply goes on, especially for the cloud, right? So the second step is efficient administration. The first step was visibility, understanding what's happening. The second step is efficient permission administration and management. The problem with this approach is that most native tools are very restricting in their capabilities. What do I mean by that? Let me show you a simple example, right? So let's say I want to find out which of my users have delegated permissions in Active Directory. How would I do that? Let me show you this with a quick example right here. So if I head on to my VM and minimize this as well, right? And let's say I have delegated permissions on this particular OU for my user using the delegation of control wizard, right? And also multiple OUs and objects in Active Directory. So how would I find the delegated permissions? There is just one way to do this. All you got to do is click on the OU, let's say the domain controller's OU, right click, properties, security, and you can check the permissions right here for your each user that has been delegated permissions, right? Another way you could do this is by using PowerShell scripts or command prompt scripts if you have them. But the problem with scripts is that they often introduce unwanted changes. Scripts can be malicious, and the bigger problem here, bigger problem I faced was I could not get scripts that were uniquely catered to my needs. For instance, I want to find out a report about a user in a particular department in a particular group membership, right? I want to find granular details about a particular user, and it's extremely difficult to find a script that will help you get those details that you want, that will help you query those details, right? The other option is a GUI tool, but like I said, using a GUI tool is very repetitive process. It's a very manual process where you have to keep clicking to see what's happening on your Active Directory objects. But with AD360, you can manage and administer permissions pretty efficiently. So let me show you a quick example right here. If I head into AD360 and AD Manager Plus, again, a module of AD360, do you remember the security reports right here? And if I head into search permissions right here, all I got to do is select an OU here, select an object for which I want to find out the delegated permissions for, specify the permission that I want to see, right? So this is complete customization options for you. And once I hit generate, I have the information right in front of me, right? And not just the parent OU, this report gives you permissions of the sub OUs as well, or the nested OUs within the parent OU. This is how simple it is to search for permissions with AD Manager Plus. Just select what you need from the dropdown, hit generate, and you are good to go. Let's say I want to find out permissions about my files and folders, right? So folders accessible by accounts, select the folder, select the account, select the subfolder level for which you want to check permissions for, hit generate, and you are good to go. You can just click on permissions and you can view the granular permissions that you want, right? Share or folder permissions. So like I said, these reports that you see right here have built-in management activities that will help you generate information, and not just generate information, but also fix them. For example, if I head into inactive users right here, this will show me all of my users who are enabled but haven't logged on in a long time. So once the information is in front of me, I can simply check, carry out the management action right here, right? But we have something called the management tab that will help you administer your permissions more efficiently. So this is what I mean. So if I head into file server management right here, you have something called modify NTFS permissions, right? Now you could select a folder here, you could set the permission that you want, and once you hit modify, permissions across all of those folders that you've selected here will be applied. And the thing is, we always give something extra with AD360 or with our toolsets. In this case, these unique checkboxes. For instance, if I check this box, all the existing permissions on a folder will be removed, and the permissions that you've specified here, only those will be applied. And if you have a folder with, let's say, least privilege access already implemented, you can simply copy the permissions and let it apply to the folders right here. Right, so the management tab will help you to drill down to individual user attributes and manage them. For instance, if I head into group attributes right here, I can manage the group memberships for multiple users right from this place. Right, if I head into, let's say, reset password, I can reset passwords for multiple users. All I got to do is specify given the username, or import a CSV file with a list of usernames, hit go, and I am good to go. Right, so these are just a few examples. Using AD360, you can efficiently manage your on-premise infrastructure. And similarly, head into Office 365 Manager Plus, and you've got granular management tasks for your Azure Active Directory as well. You can see here, so there are multiple management tasks for your Azure Active Directory, management tasks for Exchange Online, Microsoft Teams, and the list simply goes on. Right, so this is just a glimpse into the number of administrative and management actions that you can perform within AD360. You can also delegate tasks in AD360. For instance, let me quickly show you an example right here. If I head into delegation, right, and head into help desk roles, create a new role, you could delegate roles for your users, right? And these roles are extremely granular. For instance, I can delegate my user to create users, manage group memberships and their passwords in AD. And if I want to, I can also let my user reset passwords in Office 365 and let's say manage group members within Office 365 as well. Right, so once the role is created, all I got to do is head into technicians, configure my user to whom I want to delegate permissions to as a technician. And the best part here is that all the permissions that have been delegated are listed right here. So if you can recollect, when we discussed about the parameters, I spoke to you about a point where I said delegated permissions or privileged permissions or permissions granted to users must be documented, right? And the delegated permissions report right here will document those permissions. With audit report, you can find out all the activities your delegated users have been doing. Your users with admin roles, right? You can find out all the activities they've been doing. Similarly, for Office 365 Manager Plus, you can head into delegation. And if you wish to, you can delegate more granular tasks across Azure Active Directory and Office 365 environments and with the delegation tab in Office 365 Manager Plus, right? The logic stays the same. You can delegate, you can maintain a list, and you can also audit the delegated actions. And the best part here, the cherry on the cake here, is that this is non-invasive delegation. So once you delegate permissions, right, permissions are delegated only through the tool. So there are no native changes being changed. For instance, if I want my user to reset passwords on a bunch of users, if I want to delegate the task to my user, I can delegate the task using AD Manager Plus, but then there are no native permission changes. Native permissions are not modified, right? So that's completely zero risk because everything is happening to the tool and it's extremely secure because you have a list and you're auditing what's happening. Similarly, we've got automation within AD360 as well. This is just a simple automation. For instance, if your user is promoted to a manager, you can automate the entire process, meaning add the user to the manager group, change the home folder path, change the logon hours, update Exchange mailbox permissions, and you can set a particular time and you can notify the admin as well. Right? There are many other ways you could set up automation. For instance, in this case, if your user's mailbox storage quota are constantly running out and you need to run back to your system and update the quota whenever it's running out, you could set a condition-based automation to update the mailbox storage quota automatically. Right? Let's say your users, your account unlock, your unlock processes or unblock processes or reset password processes take up a major chunk of your day. You could just put that in an automation and let the tool handle it for you. Right? Let's say you wish to hide or unhide your users from global address lists. Right? A very common use case that I often hear about, meaning let's say you have users synced with Office 365, right? And your user is disabled in Active Directory, so you do not want your user's email ID to be shown in the global address list. This happens a lot in organizations and an admin has to go down to the global address list and manually hide each user. But with this automation, tedious tasks and repetitive and manual tasks such as that can be automated. So let me show you a quick example right here. If I head into AD Manager Plus, head into automation, You can see that there are a bunch of automations here already made for you, right? This is user creation across AD, Office 365, Exchange, and G Suite. So it's hybrid user creation, so you could automate the entire process. This is group membership management, like I told you. This is AD cleanup, cleaning up of inactive or stale user accounts. So all you got to do is head into create new automation, and let's say I want to reset the password of my user, right? So I can simply set the password right here and select a report, the reports that we discussed earlier, from which the users would be taken from, right? Set a time for the automation, enable notification to notify the admin or the help desk, and you are good to go, right? Another important part in management that I want to mention is if I head into management, you've got something called creation and modification templates, right? So if I head into modification templates and click on create a new template, you can see that these are pre-created or preset values for your users' attributes. For instance, you can create a template with the required group memberships, right? With the required profile path or home folder path, with the required password flags that we've set up here. And once you create a template, you can reuse the template when you modify your users, right? A good use case is the one I just gave, when your users are promoted. So you can have a manager template ready, put it in the automation, let the automation run at a desired time you want, but at the same time, you are notified. Nothing goes unnoticed, right? So these are just a few examples of automation, but you can set up automation in Active Directory and in Azure Active Directory as well, right? So all you got to do is head into Office 365 Manager Plus, automation, set up the automation that you want. Right here, the options for you are endless. All you got to do is analyze your use case, analyze what you need to do. For instance, unblock users or license modification right here, and set the automation to run at a desired time. But at the same time, you are notified at all times. So no automation runs without your knowledge. Right? Another important feature that I wanted to talk about when it comes to management and administration is workflow in AD360. So let's say there is a critical task, right? It's like setting folder permissions or adding users to groups, right? That you want to be double checked. You can do that with workflow. So let me quickly explain it to you. If I head into AD Manager Plus, we've got something called workflow right here. Right? So workflow enables you to have a multi-step check whenever critical activities are performed. For instance, right, let's say a requester configured in AD Manager Plus by the administrator, right? So a requester is configured and the requester wants permission on a particular folder. So the requester says, read folder permission, right? So requester raises a request right here. You can select the folders that you wish right here. You can specify the user to whom you want to apply the permissions for, and you can set the duration. Right? So these are time-based permissions right here for your files and folders. So when you set the permission, when you raise the request, it goes through multiple people right here. A reviewer reviews it, and approver approves it. Only when the executor says okay and executes the action will the request actually be carried out. Will the management activity actually be done? Right? So critical actions such as setting folder permissions, adding or removing users from groups, or even resetting user passwords or unlocking user accounts can be subject to a workflow process where there is a multi-step check by your authorized people in your organization. So no activity, no management activity will ever go unnoticed, right? Now, so this concludes the second part. That's permission management and administration. We just have one last part. Monitoring permission changes on resources, right? Like I said, when your users join in an organization, over the lifespan in an organization, they undergo multiple access changes. Changes are made on them. Permissions are changed on the users, and permissions are changed on other resources by those users, right? So all of these changes must be authorized and must be documented for security and for compliance purposes. So let me show you a really, really quick example here. Right. So let me minimize this and head on to my system right here. Right. So what I'll do here is open up PowerShell. Right. Now this is just me trying to tell you the importance of real-time monitoring, the importance of change monitoring your infrastructure. So I am a user called Ross. I've logged on to my system. And now what I'm going to do is run a command called PowerShell.exe-exec and then bypass. And now I'm going to shift to the desktop and import a module, right? Import a script right here. That's basically a domain password attack script. So it's going to be domain password spray.ps1. Right? So invoke domain password spray, and I'm going to give in the password, which is going to be password at 1, 2, 3. And once I click enter, you can see that the password attack has started, and just within a few seconds, I have a list of user passwords right in front of me. And this is an attack on my on-premises Active Directory. Right? So this attack will not be tracked by most antiviruses because this is a script-based attack. There is no fancy tool used here, just a few lines of code, and I can get access to user passwords. And get what? This attack can be run with no privileges at all. So this makes monitoring for changes, change monitoring, a really important aspect of your hybrid IT essential decision. Right? For instance, privilege roles granted to users, data modified on storage devices. For instance, files copied, changed, read, deleted from storage devices, members added to security groups, activities performed by administrative and users with admin roles, right? Or a simple password attack or a logon attempt from an unauthorized remote machine. All of these activities must be change monitored, must be tracked. Right? So this is where our solution AD Audit Plus, again, a module of AD360 comes in handy, where you can monitor for changes across Active Directory. Like you can see, what you got to do is head into logon activity or logon failures, and you can find out such attack attempts right here. You can head into role management. Let me quickly refresh this. Right. So what I'm trying to say here is using this one tool, one console right here, you can monitor for changes across your Active Directory, such as logon failures, users added or removed from groups, right? Group policy changes, permission changes on security objects, changes on your domain node, also your changes in Azure Active Directory, such as admin roles granted to users in Azure AD, devices created or modified in Azure Active Directory, licenses assigned to users, application changes within Azure Active Directory. If I head into file audit, you can monitor changes across your data storage devices, like your Windows file servers, your NetApp, your EMC, your Synology, where you can monitor changes on all your files and folders, files created, modified, deleted, moved, changed, right? And if I head into server audit, tab right here, you can monitor changes on all your servers in your organization. For instance, if I have a USB storage device that I plugged into a workstation, as an attacker, that's something that can be tracked right here. If I'm running a malicious script that we just ran to perform a password spray attack, you can audit the use of such scripts right here. Right? You can audit your network shares, you can audit your local logon logoffs, and you can set up customized alerts. For instance, I can head into configuration, right? And I can set up a customized alert right here. All I got to do is select a report from the reports right here, and I can set an alert that will notify my admin via email, via SMS, right? I can further filter the alert. For instance, if there are more than 5 logons happening under a minute, it could be a password spray attack, right? So alert my admin via email, via SMS. If there is something malicious happening, if there is a file access happening outside of business hours, alert me. So that could happen as well. I can further filter it based on certain attributes as well and set up customized alerts. Right? And last but not the least, I can execute a remedial script. So if I find my user running a malicious script to perform a password spray attack, I can immediately terminate the user's session or shut down the user's computer, right? But at the same time, notify the admin of the changes that are happening. So this is really important monitoring for changes, and this completes our triangle: visibility, administration, and change monitoring, right? Last but not the least, we give you built-in compliance reports, meaning reports that will help you gear up for your compliances when your auditors come knocking. So let me quickly show you that. Head into AD Audit Plus, reports. We've got compliance-based reports right here. So all of these reports will help you be ready or get the information that you need to be ready when your compliance officers or when your auditors come knocking into your company. Right, so quick recap of what we saw. We understood the hybrid IT essentials, right? We understood that essentials are something that will help you better manage your infrastructure, help you gain better visibility, and also enforce security. And then we understood the hybrid IT landscape, the changes that were before and how the landscape is now. We went through the parameters, and then we employed the triangle formula where we employed a three-step approach. Step number one is to gain visibility on the state of permission. Step number two is to set up efficient permission administration and management systems in place with workflows, with automation, with management capabilities in AD360. And last but not the least, we enforced security. We enforced change monitoring across Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and data storage devices, such as your file servers, NetApp, EMC, the list simply goes on. That's all about today. Now, I understand that this may be a little bit too much. This may be a lot of information, but trust me, all of this had to be covered today because hybrid IT is a huge landscape, right? But no worries, the recording will be sent to you on your email, so you could take a look at it at your own leisure, or you could share it with your teammates as well. Now, before I end this webinar, I will be pushing in a quick poll. You will see a question flash across your screen, and if you can help me out with the answers, that would be really helpful. Right, so you just see a question flash across your screen. If you could let me know your thoughts, if you can help me out with the answers, that would be really helpful. Thank you for your responses, guys. Now, I hope you found this session informative. I tried to put in as much as information as I could. I would love to hear your thoughts. Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on my email at abi@manageengine.com anytime, and I would be more than happy to help you. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this session informative. Stay home, stay safe, and I hope you have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you so much, and I'll see you the next time.